What's up guys, KplaysHere. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most popular recommendations for a good general purpose horn. A Monster Hunter subreddit and multiplayer favoring Duder's favorite, the Queen Chordmaker. An upgraded Valkyrie Chordmaker, its dulcet, regal song invokes the new life of spring. Chordmaker is a classic horn that's been in several games in the past, but this time it's filling a very different niche thanks to a change in its stats and songs. In Wild it's got some very good traits that a lot of people praise it for, and also a few not so good ones that most tend to overlook. So what we're going to do here is look it over from a more neutral perspective to weigh those pros and cons. Right off the bat, 200 raw puts it at the lowest possible raw attack for all fully upgraded weapons. Not exactly the best start, but straightforward power isn't really what this horn is well known for. 15% affinity and 250 poison status work hand in hand, because that built-in critical status 3 and poison duration up is clearly meant for making sure monsters are drooling purple as much as possible. Now for Hunting Horn, this isn't actually the best route to go for a status inflicting weapon. Ideally, we've had Echo Wave Poison to focus on and use that 40% critical status boost on physical hits as a bonus rather than the main status source. Instead though, Chordmaker has the default Blunt Waves. Ringing this bell against monster skulls may have them seeing stars much more frequently than usual, but a status machine this one is not. Speaking of ringing bells though, let's listen to what it sounds like before getting into what makes this horn shine. Don't really know where the random drum beats come from on the encore and the echo bubble dance, but this chiming bell has a much more consistent theme in its song list. All healing all the time. The health regen bubble provides constant passive healing whenever you're under its effects. On its own this is nice for topping your health off between taking hits, but we can do a few steps better. The purple red green note set has a short and sweet song list. If you want to get some active healing in, you got health recovery small for your smaller scrapes and bumps, and melody of life for emergency healing anything more life threatening. And speaking of Melody of Life, I should probably mention here that it's now a much stronger healer than it was before after their shadow buff not listed in the patch notes of the most recent update. It's now with the 75 HP from I think 50 if I'm remembering it correctly. Update 1.011 is just the gift that keeps on giving, huh? But anyway, you've got some options. If you don't want to commit to a full Melody of Life, if you string together some small heals, you can actually recover quite a bit of health a few chunks at a time. The faster Wildstar recital makes this a lot more doable than it was in the past. Second to last, we break up the healing trend a bit with the all-important attack up L, which you really need to offset that low raw. And finally, we've got the star of the show. Recovery speed up large. With this song active, your red health recovery increases from 1 per second to 4. Nice for getting healthy again sooner after taking a hit, but we're not looking at this song buff on its own. No, we're going to be using it as the first component of an utterly, ridiculously effective meme strategy. Because see, unlike with most song effects that match skill effects, this melody can stack with the recovery speed on your armor, which on its own will increase your recovery speed with each point, up to quadrupling the base rate.
But wait! There's more!
Meet the Humble Immunizer. When you take this item, you know what, I'm not even going to say it. You guys can probably figure out where I'm going with this. You're watching a Hunting Horn video, so I'm sure you're smart ones. Yes, this does exactly what you think it does, and yes, it does stack with the previous 2 steps in the strategy. With all these combined, your red health recovery rate goes through the roof. As soon as it appears, it's almost entirely gone.
But wait! There's more!
Yeah, that's right, we're full sending this gimmick. The catch with the red health base skills is that once there's no more in your health bar, they aren't doing anything. So to avoid that, we'll add even more recovery effects to the mix. Recovery up will give you a maximum of a 30% buff to all your healing effects, including potions, which we're, let's be real, unlikely to ever need with this horn, healing songs, and healing set bonuses. The super recovery effect from Voshia armor is the main one we'll be looking at today, since the set fits what I suggest with adding with this horn very well. You can either double the regen effect with the full 4-piece, or drop it down to just 2 to use the basic amount with another set bonus. Regular Arc Build's Heist and Recovery is a no-brainer possibility there, for extra healing every couple hits, but personally I kinda feel like we're already overkilling our healing so much that another source would get lost in the sauce. But anyway, if any of you have been following me since the World and Iceborne days, you'll recall that I did a similar video on this topic a long time ago using horns with this exact same song list. Well, in Wilds, we got access to an even stronger version of this straight out of the gate, since the current version of the build gives us every skill/set bonus we needed to complement the song effects, And Queen Chordmaker has a ton of extra built-in healing. Activate your recovery speed up L, pop an immunizer, drop a few regen bubbles, and well, you're pretty much... I mean, just look at this gameplay. Final boss of the game, I'm not even trying to avoid hits. Even though poor Zoe is putting in some sizable dents into my health bar, they just don't stick. I can't be stopped. It literally took me intentionally taking his nuke for it to finally take me out. And if you have your cat Vigor Wasp healing you, forget about it. So imagine actually trying with this build, or maybe putting it in the hands of someone that struggles to survive hunts. 2 words, crazy comfort. In multiplayer where this horn really shines, you might not be able to share portions of this busted regen, namely the set bonus, the recovery speed skill, and your immunizers unless you use that, skill which would not be named. But luckily for your teammates, their unkillable zombie of a hunting horn user, that's you by the way, can also share a portion of their power in the song or bubble form at will. This is exactly one other horn that can heal harder than the Chordmaker in its own way, the Grudgestander Urka from Guardian Doshiguma, but our green bell certainly does its own thing perfectly fine. It's basically a matchup of extremely strong passive regen versus extremely strong manual healing. Chordmaker can set and forget a chunk of its abilities, while Grudgestander does its thing more actively, but we'll get into those details more with that horn review. The fact that the former has attack of L in its list is a significant advantage, since you'll be able to throw a group-wide 10% damage boost out at will, while also pairing it with a 15% affinity from a secondary horn. And speaking of that extra affinity, it comes in handy alongside the specific skills I throw into my Queen Chordmaker builds. Since it's a low attack power horn with powerful healing gimmicks, I tend to stray away from some of the normal skills while also trying to shove in some extra oomph behind my hits. That led me to 2 rarely used skills, Peak Performance and Foray. Now, disclaimer, if it weren't for the fact that we were talking about gimmick builds here, I would normally never suggest either skill. WoW's versions of both are way too inefficient per skill point compared to the other skills to be considered worthwhile. However, since this is a for funsies build, that's intentionally going off the beaten path, I'd say why not? Let's try something different. The Peak Performance version of this build is quote-unquote ideal if you're consistently at full health, which is a lot more realistic than usual for your average hunters with the constant IV drip of healing we got going on here. You can potentially have a very high uptime on the extra attack if you don't play too recklessly, or at the very least you won't be constantly stopping to reactivate it by healing manually. And whenever it's down, you have Counter-Strike to fill in the gap. Foray, on the other hand, the uptime is totally dependent on how often you can keep your monster poisoned. And it also gives you extra affinity compared to Peak Performance. Obviously you'd want to use this against a particularly poison weak monster, because again, no Echo Wave poison means that we're relying on applying status the normal way for melee weapons, with roughly 1/3 of all your attacks. Typically we don't want to do that. Hunting Horn is a status monster, but only if you have waves to spam. Without those, even with the critical status like we have here, your status output pales in comparison. Feel free to try this version of the build out if you like poison weapons though. If you got that preference, you may as well go all out. And as a last note, if you notice that I only added 2 points of recovery up to both these sets, that's on purpose. It's because you can save yourself the need to add that last point if you eat for Feline Medic. All in all, for pure comfort, keeping yourself and other players alive, Queen Chordmaker is easily among the top choices. On the other hand though, it's worth keeping in mind that it unfortunately does not carry quite enough weight in the damage dealing department for me to consider it a meta option. Certainly a must-craft form if you want to enjoy the whole Nero mortality thing, and are used to collecting a whole selection of dude sticks, but I personally reserve the meta category for only the strongest in terms of actual stats. Powerful gimmicks are still gimmicks, and while some can be extremely effective and fun, meta tends to boil things down to just the hardest hitters and the fastest killers. Rathian's horn definitely isn't either, but again, that by no means makes it a bad horn. If we ignored the shenanigans our song buffing abilities allowed us to get into and just focused on damage potential, what would even be the point in playing Hunting Horn? Hammer's right there. At the same time though, ignoring the weapon side in favor of the buffs can lead you to some pretty misguided conclusions too. A good perspective on Hunting Horn takes both halves of the weapon into account, which is what I'll be trying to do with the selection we have here in Wilds. Let me know what your opinion is on the Queen Chordmaker though. Best horn ever? Too weak? More of a gimmick? Share your thoughts down below in the comments. Until next time though, this has been another KPlays and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.